Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you? If you would identify yourselves for the official record, and your 5 minutes will begin.
Okay, my name is Chris Buckley, and I'm the president of the Ontario Federation of Labour. With me here today is Tavaki, our Director of Research and Education, and our legal counsel, Daniel. The Ontario Federation of Labour represents 54 unions and approximately 1 million workers across the province of Ontario, and we champion the rights of all working people, both non-unionized and unionized workers. The changes that the Fair Workplaces, Better Jobs Act will make to the Labour Relations Act and Employment Standards Act are going to affect the lives of generations to come in this province. This is a chance to get it right and to improve conditions for workers across Ontario, whether they are unionized workers or not. It is encouraging that the government has introduced this bill, which includes increasing the general minimum wage to $15 an hour. Although the bill makes steps in the right direction, there is a need to go further in a number of areas to create stronger conditions for decent work here in Ontario. The OFL has set out the changes that are urgently needed before Bill 148 becomes law. It is every worker's constitutional right to organize, access unionization, to engage in meaningful collective bargaining, and to strike. It is very important to protect these rights in Bill 148. For that reason, I'd like to start with the needed amendments to the Labour Relations Act. Fair workplaces are unionized workplaces. We know union workers do better. It must be easier for workers to join a union if they choose to. In particular, women, racialized workers, Indigenous workers, workers with a disability, and youth do better when they work in a unionized workplace. All workers must be covered by the Labour Relations Act with no exclusions. Many workers are still excluded from the Labour Relations Act under Bill 148. For instance, professional workers, domestic and agricultural workers. This is a significant omission that must be addressed. The legislation does not address giving franchise workers greater access to their right to join a union. Workers in franchises should be able to unionize not just their workplace, but across the franchise. Bill 148 can make the change by treating workers of a common franchisor like Tim Hortons and a single employer with multiple locations, giving all Tim Hortons workers in the area the same bargaining rights. Bill 148 should mandate employers to provide greater access to workplace information in order to strengthen workers' rights to organize. This includes information like employees' job classification, employment status, and org charts. This is the same information that is provided by employers in the federal jurisdiction. Card-based certification must be extended to all workers in the province of Ontario. Bill 148 provides card-based certification to only 3 additional sectors: temp agency industries, the building services sector, home care, and community service industries. Why should any worker be left out? It is imperative that our government protect workers' rights to choose their own union through card-based certification. Without card-based certification, employees are vulnerable to employer harassment in the time between certification and the vote. When an employee has decided to join a union, they must quickly reach a first contract with their employer. The first collective agreement sets the foundation for workers' bargained rights. But employers can delay the first contract bargaining, leading to labor disputes. Bill 148 should provide automatic access to first agreement arbitration to support the right to meaningful collective bargaining. Right now, unionized contract workers often lose both their collective agreement and their bargaining rights if the service contract covering the worksite changes hands. This is the case even if the new contract provider hires the same employees to perform the same work in the same location. It should not matter whether workers are employed in a publicly or privately funded contracted service. All workers deserve protection against contract flipping. Bill 148 should extend successorship rights to all contracted services. Bill 148 can also meaningfully support workers' rights to collective action by prohibiting replacement workers. The law should not in any way undermine workers who are fighting for decent work by exercising their constitutional right to withdraw their labor. The Employment Standards Act is also sorely in need of changes, and I will briefly outline the needed changes. Bill 148 must extend Employment Standards Act coverage to dependent contractors. Language on equal pay for equal work must be strengthened in the bill. All parties, including unions, must be prohibited from contracting out of the Employment Standards Act. Bill 148 must remove all exemptions to the minimum wage. It must also provide just cause protection for all workers and provide 7 paid personal emergency leave days. Bill 148 must support domestic and sexual violence survivors by
Thank you.
establishing.
The first round will open with the official opposition. MPP.
Are you sure that was 5 minutes?
I'm positive. Trust.
I was going as fast as I could.
MPP Yakubuski.
If you want to finish, Chris, thanks for coming. If you want to finish, if you can wrap it up in not too long a time, go ahead.
Sure I will. Most of all, a young person who is struggling to find full-time work, and 1.7 million Ontarians are earning at or near the minimum wage in precarious jobs. The OFL strongly expects that the government will amend the bill that has been presented to the legislature. I urge you to make it fair for all Ontarians and make these amendments to Bill 148. Thanks for allowing me to finish.
Thank you, Chris. Boy, you covered a lot of stuff. It seems like it was only 5 minutes, but you covered an awful lot of stuff there.
I would go longer if you let me.
Yeah. From franchises to first contract arbitration to exemption, we've met in the past, and I know you've been advocating for a long time for the $15 minimum wage, and we'll start with that. We've heard from businesses all across the province, and I'm sure that you've been following this as closely as I have because it's part of what you do. I'm sure you're not surprised to some degree about the level of concern that has been raised by them. There are issues with respect to the speed of 20% and then another 10% in a very short period of time. Do you feel they have a legitimate concern about the smallest of those businesses, about their own ability to continue to provide those jobs? Because they go on to say that some of those, they've said that some of those jobs may have to be reduced and or eliminated.
Well, you know what? First of all, I want to thank all of you. You've had a busy 2 weeks traveling across the province, and I am not surprised in the least that businesses are pushing back. We fully expected business to push back. I was told today when I did a radio interview that there's an article in the Globe and Mail today from the Magna Corporation that the increase in a $15 minimum wage is going to hurt their business. Well, I think I've told you before when I've been here, I represented auto workers for 27 years of my life. And I happen to know that the Magna Corporation has made billions of dollars on the backs of workers in the province of Ontario. So I have no sympathy for Magna complaining about an increase in minimum wage. I've also heard the government today saying that they understand that some small businesses might be negatively impacted, and they're willing to work with these small businesses to make sure that there's very little pain. I do not believe that the Vice President of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, when he said shortly after May the 30th that it would be catastrophic to the province of Ontario because of an increased minimum wage. Over 1.7 million workers in this province are earning at or close to minimum wage, living in poverty. They're working numerous minimum wage, making $11.40 an hour, and then forced to go to our local food banks to put food on their table. That's not the Ontario we want. I know you're a business owner or a former business owner, and when we met, you told me you treated your people with respect and dignity, and I believe you. I believe you. Not every business owner does that. I know some business owners are going to push back. Well, you know what? It's not rocket science. I'm not an economist, but I do know one thing. If you pay workers a decent wage, that's more money that comes out of their pocket that they can spend in every community across this province. They can spend it in the businesses across their communities, and they can help create thriving, stronger communities and an Ontario we want.
So, Chris, on that small business that it really does feel threatened, you talked about the government offering some help. But if they're talking about, socializing or some kind of a subsidy or something like that, isn't that just transferring the responsibility of government that, if people are living in poverty, isn't it the responsibility of the government to see that, they're talking about this guaranteed annual income experiments? And so instead of the government doing what they should be doing to raise that standard of living, are they not just transferring it to the small business owner as opposed to doing what maybe they should have been doing already?
You know what? It's difficult for me to answer that because right now we don't know what any type of aid would look like. You know, your suggestion of what it might look like. We don't know that yet because we don't have the law in place. But I do know one thing. Increasing the minimum wage will generate $5 billion a year in this province in spending power for workers. I bargained collective agreements all my life. I've been representing workers for 30 years in the province of Ontario. I have yet gone to a bargaining table where the employer automatically put a big bag of cash on the table and said, help yourself, how much do you want?
Can I just,
It doesn't happen.
so on the issue of binding arbitration.
Thank you. Go to the third party, MPP
He can
Fife.
finish his questions if you like.
MPP Fife.
I'm teasing you. I don't think Catherine's going to give you any hard time. I tried.
Not a chance, no. Thank you very much for a really thorough presentation and also with specific amendments, so this is good for us to have it in hand. You did, though, because we're already with you on many of the issues, the one really glaring for us opportunity to strengthen designated leave for survivors of domestic and/or sexual violence. You started to go down that road, Chris, but it is, you know, perhaps this is unintended consequences, I'm not sure, but because the government is requiring workers to use their personal emergency days, it further shortens their leave entitlement and restricts their ability to use it for other purposes such as illness or bereavement. So you are recommending for victims who are fleeing or trying to survive domestic or sexual violence so that they have a chance of maintaining some stable employment, that that Bill 148 should create designated leave for survivors, 10 paid days of job-protected leave. Can you talk about the 10 days, the importance of the 10 days, but then you also you qualify that as well in your report. So this is of great interest to us.
Absolutely, and you all have our submission. Our submission's been forwarded. You know what? We appreciate the emergency leaves, 2 of which are paid. But we're asking for a separate job-protected leave for those women who are survivors of domestic or sexual violence. Let's face it, folks, this issue is not going away. When a woman has experienced domestic or sexual violence, the last thing she needs to worry about is taking time off and losing her job without income. Women need to have the security of knowing, number one, they still have a job. Number two, they're not losing any income, so they have time to get their affairs in order, get their life in order. Every December the 6th in this country, we recognize the women that were killed through domestic violence in this country, and it's not going away. I think the government, regardless of which political party you're members of, should champion this cause and show women in the province of Ontario, if you're a survivor, the government's going to protect you. The government's going to help you get your life in order. And we're going to make sure that employers give you that leave. We're going to make sure that employers compensate you, so when you come back to work, you have a fresh beginning, you have a new beginning, and hopefully you never experience it again.
Absolutely. And I do want to thank you on behalf of our critic Peggy Sattler, who brought forward this legislation
Absolutely.
originally, and you have been longstanding supporters in this. And not only is there a compassionate case to be made for extending these days, there's actually an economic case to be made as well.
there is.
Women are an important part of the workforce.
Absolutely.
And this legislation requires a better gender lens, if you will, going
Sure it
forward.
does.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Thanks for your question.
Thank you. We'll move to the government. MPP Anderson.
Yes,
Hi, how are you?
Thanks. We have a long history going back from the tribunal days.
Yeah,
So it's
you're in
good
my
to see
neighborhood
you.
too. You're in my
That's
region.
right, that's right.
too. Good
And
to see
thank you for your advocacy on behalf of injured workers. I know you work hard on their behalf, and we have had a few cases together, so
Yeah.
thank you for being here. I know you spoke about the removal of exemptions to the minimum wage, and you referenced Tim Hortons, and I believe you could include McDonald's in that as well. I don't know if there are any Tim Hortons, etc., that's unionized at the moment, but you want the exemptions removed so you can and make it easier for card-based unionization of those. You want to talk a little bit about that?
About
Really?
card-based certification?
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, it's a worker's constitutional right. You know, you've heard the member from the Conservatives agree to that. I don't know why that it's not in place under Bill 148 for every worker in every sector of the province of Ontario. You know, unions provide such a good service to this province. And I'm not saying that because I've been a member of a union my entire working life. And, You know, I'm now the president of the Ontario Federation of Labor. But our amendments to Bill 148 are intended to help every worker in the province, just not unionized workers. And I know through my years of collective bargaining what unions provide to workers in a workplace and what unions provide to our communities and what value we bring and how we bargain and how, when we can, every time we go to the bargaining table, we make improvements, whether that's in paid time off, whether that's in paid leave, in vacation, in benefit entitlement. There's a host of issues that unions take care of with employers that maybe the government wouldn't have to dabble in, the government wouldn't have to worry about providing. Unions across this province know how to get the job done, but most importantly, absolutely, we're grateful that you've included 3 additional sectors. Absolutely. Include every sector. Make it fair. You know, on May the 30th, the backdrop for the government's announcement was fair workplaces, better jobs. If the government is absolutely serious about being fair, what better way to show being fair than give card-based certification to every worker in every sector in the province of Ontario? That's making it fair.
And I know you're genuine about that, because I know you probably don't have any employees that you represent that makes minimum wage. So you're here on behalf of
all workers in the province of Ontario.
And
together we can make this the Ontario we want.
That's right, and I'm sure we all want that, and I believe in that wholeheartedly. And do you want to expound on anything else that you didn't have an opportunity to earlier?
No, you know what, number one, I thank you for your time. Our submission is before you. I'd ask you to take a serious look at, but most importantly, hey, listen, folks, I understand politics. I come out of a very nasty political local union. Trust me, I understand it. I have no time left in my head for politics. And I know you folks have to. I know that's the life you lead. But let's think about one thing here. Let's think about collectively, between the labor movement and all 3 political provincial parties in this province, if we come together, think about the good we can do. Think about the Ontario we can build. Think about the communities we can build. And like Brother Smokey Thomas said earlier, there will be some bumps in the road when you implement or amend some of this legislation. But collectively, if we work together, think about the province we can build. Think about the people that we can lift out of poverty. Think about how much better our young people will feel. I'm extremely worried about the youth of our province. I'm extremely worried. Never before have we seen so many young people looking for stable full-time jobs. Over 460,000 young people as of 2016 were working in part-time jobs. Over 70,000 of those young people were holding down multiple part-time jobs. For the most part, our kids have listened to us. They've gone to school, they've got their education, and they're graduating to the unemployment line, or they're stuck in part-time jobs, working for temporary hired agencies, contract workers. That's not the future we should be giving to our young people. No. So again, collectively, let's work together. Let's amend the contents of Bill 148. Let's move forward, and let's create the Ontario we all should be proud of.
Very well said, Chris. Thank you for being here. And
thank you.
Advocacy.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. If you have a further written submission, it needs to be to the clerk by 5:30 tonight.
I'll
Thank
have
you.
Tabaki get on our draft 2.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.